and this is precisely supported by the inventory that Nephi provided of the brass plates that is found in our Book of Mormon. Beautiful fit. The second test is the Israeli E and the Jewish J versions of the Book of Moses. The evidence at the core of the documentary hypothesis asserts that there were different versions of the Book of Moses, each used exclusively by one of the two kingdoms. Friedman concludes, if we separate the Elohim, the E stories, from the Yahweh, the J stories, we get a consistent series of clues that the E stories were written by someone concerned with Israel, and the J stories were written by someone concerned with Judah. Does the Book of Mormon support the theory that there existed a separate version of the books of Moses for each kingdom, Israel in the north and Judah in the south? The answer is clearly yes. And in fact, the Book of Mormon distinguishes between these two records by their tribal origins, more so than any other ancient record does. Listen to how Nephi puts this. This kind of shed new light on Nephi's actual description. Nephi and the brass plates had their roots in the kingdom of Israel. This is the land of the E version of the documentary hypothesis. The Book of Mormon reads itself this. Listen to how the Book of Mormon puts this. Wherefore the fruit of thy loins, Joseph, Ephraim, Israel, in verse 4, shall write, and the fruit of the loins of Judah shall write, and that which shall be written by the fruit of thy loins, and also that which shall be written by the fruit of the loins of Judah shall grow together. There's the two different versions, E and J. Isn't that fascinating? 2 Nephi chapter 3, verse 12. I bet you never read that the same again, do you? So the Book of Mormon goes so far as to explain how a version in the brass plates, presumably an E version of the kingdom of Israel and Joseph, is different from the modern Bible, itself based on the Jewish Torah. The Torah is Hebrew for law. The book that thou beholdest is a record of the Jews, which contains the covenants of the Lord, which he hath made unto the house of Israel. Not Judah. Israel, you see? And it must also contain many of the prophecies of the holy prophets, and it is a record like unto the gravings which are upon the plates of brass, save there are not so many. 1 Nephi 13:23. So the Book of Mormon consistently shows the two separate versions, E and J. Fascinating, isn't it? The third test that Potter notes is a version of the Book of Moses identified as prophecies of the holy prophets, and that's 1 Nephi 5:13. The brass plates collection of prophecies of the holy prophets is not identified as belonging to another group. It can be assumed that this record was their tribal version of the Book of Moses, the kingdom of Israel's version. The E version had all the testimony of the prophets and their prophecies. Does documentary hypothesis support the idea that there is such a version of the Book of Moses in Nephi's time? Friedman says they, both the E source and the D source, have placed both greater emphasis on the role of prophets. And this makes sense, given that their their heroes included such figures as Moses, Samuel, Ahijah, and later Jeremiah. Version D is identified as Deuteronomy, which does not cover events from the beginning of time. However, version E includes the creation and emphasizes the prophets. Biblical scholars have concluded that version E was written by authors from the kingdom of Israel in the north. Not only does this support the authorship claims of the Book of Mormon, but it also explains how the collector Laban actually came into possession of the records, because he was a descendant of Joseph also. Again, Nephi explained that the Jewish version differed from the Joseph or Israel versions on the brass plates. The brass plates contained more prophecies and emphasized the prophets. Evidence for this argument is found in the Book of Mormon itself. Nephi writes of his father, recounting prophecies made by Joseph of Egypt. This is in 2 Nephi chapter 3, presumably from the Israel or the Eve version. Because according to the documentary hypothesis, the Eve version gives special attention and treatment to Joseph. This prophesies of Joseph, whose prophecies are not found in our Hebrew Bible, which is the J document. But they are found in the Book of Mormon, which came off the brass plates, which is the Northern Israeli version, which emphasize the prophets. Beautiful consistency. There was a version of the books of Moses that emphasized prophecies. So now I'm on page 128 of Potter. The fourth test, the name of deity, E for Elohim and J for Yahweh. According to the documentary hypothesis, Nephi, well, from the conclusion that is, Nephi, who was from the kingdom of Israel, would have been expected to call deity God or Elohim. That is, even though he dwelt in Judah, he would have been taught religious terminology by the priests of Israel, who was in the north. See, we tend to confuse things and say, yes, Jews, they represent all of Israel. No, they do not. The Jews are Judah, just one of the tribes of Israel. A very important one, of course. The Messiah came through that tribe. But Judah does not equal Israel. Israel is the northern 10 tribes. That's very important to understand. So, he dwelled in Judah, but he was taught from the priests of Israel, and including his father. If Nephi had invoked the name Jehovah for deity, he would have used the terminology of Judah. But he was not from Judah. He was from Manasseh, which was in the north. Very interesting. Biblical scholarship would have reason to question the authenticity of the Book of Mormon's first author. Nephi never calls the deity Jehovah. Isn't that fascinating? Book of Mormon scholars have applied this technique to the name of Christ to show that the Book of Mormon was written by more than one author. Now listen to what Friedman says. He says the two stories, E and J, have two different pictures of what happened in history. Now, the three investigators noticed that the first version of the creation story always refers to the Creator as God 35 times. That is Elohim. And when you read in the beginning in the Hebrew Bible, just in Genesis chapter 1, Bereshit bara Elohim et Shemaim ve'et ha'aretz. And then it continually says, Vaya'as Elohim and Vayomer Elohim and Vayikra Elohim. He saw, he created, he made, he spoke. He's always mentioned by Elohim, which is a northern source name. Very interesting. The second version always refers to him by his name, Yahweh God, 11 times. The first version never calls him Yahweh, and the second version never calls him God. In translating the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith himself differentiated between God and Jehovah. The Book of Mormon refers to deity as God 1,339 times. This is E terminology of Nephi's tribe. The title Jehovah is only found in the Book of Mormon twice. Once in a quotation from Isaiah, who was a prophet from Jerusalem who would have written in J fashion, 2 Nephi 22:2, and in the last sentence in the Book of Mormon, when Moroni is clearly referring to Christ, not the Father, as Jehovah, Moroni 10:33 and 34. So the Book of Mormon is consistent with its uses of the title of deity. Now, test number 5 is the predicted biases of Book of Mormon authors. This is interesting. Friedman says that the cumulative consistent conclusion from all of the evidence of the documentary hypothesis, it seems to me, is that the early investigators were right about the existence of the two sources, J and E. The second thing is, the person who wrote J was particularly concerned with the kingdom of Judah, and the person who wrote E was particularly interested in the kingdom of Israel.